From splitting his army in half while outnumbered, to luring 120,000 men into a disaster they never saw coming, Robert E. Lee kept doing the impossible and getting away with it, until he tried it on the one man it didn't work on. In 1862, the Union had a problem. His name was Robert E. Lee, outnumbered in almost every battle he fought, and somehow kept winning anyway. Not by a little, by a lot. His troops didn't just respect him, they worshipped him. They called him Marse Robert. That's Southern for master, except coming from battle-hardened soldiers, it wasn't a rank, it was devotion. The man had basically become a myth while still alive. And over on the other side, Abraham Lincoln was losing his mind. General after general, each one handed a massive, well-supplied army and one simple job: go beat Lee. And one by one, they came back broken. McClellan, too slow. Pope, too arrogant. Burnside, too Burnside. At this point, facing Lee was basically a career-ending decision. The Union needed a win. Lincoln needed a win. And nobody, not a single person, had any idea how to get one. August 1862. Lincoln has a new army, 70,000 men under General John Pope. Pope was confident, very confident, the kind of guy who announces how dangerous he is before walking into the room. Lee called him a miscreant who needed to be taught a lesson. Accurate. Now, Lee had 50,000 men. Pope had 70,000. A logical move? Dig in, survive, don't do anything reckless. Lee split his already outnumbered army in half. He sent Stonewall Jackson on a march nearly 55 miles, on foot, in 2 days, deep behind Union lines. Nobody noticed. Jackson hit Pope's entire supply depot and burned it to the ground. Pope's reaction? We shall bag the whole crowd. He turned his entire army around to chase Jackson. He was not bagging anyone. Jackson quietly pulled back behind an unfinished railway embankment and waited. Pope attacked him for 2 straight days. Couldn't break through. Meanwhile, Longstreet slipped 25,000 men onto Pope's completely exposed flank, undetected. When Pope launched yet another attack on Jackson, Lee released the spring. Artillery first, then 25,000 Confederates charging in a line over a mile wide. The largest simultaneous mass assault of the entire war. Pope's army collapsed and streamed back to Washington. Lincoln had just built a brand new army. Lee broke it in under a week. Pope was gone, fired immediately. Lincoln's replacement? Ambrose Burnside, best remembered today for his facial hair. Literally, the word sideburns comes from his name. His military legacy? Less impressive. Burnside had a plan though. March 120,000 men to Fredericksburg, cross the Rappahannock River, and march straight for Richmond. Bold. Aggressive. Honestly, not a bad plan. On paper. One problem. The pontoon bridges didn't arrive. Not by a day, not by a week, by 2 full weeks. The one thing that needed to go right didn't. And Lee used every single day of it to calmly walk his army into position and turn the high ground above Fredericksburg into a fortress. His artillery commander looked out over the open fields below and said, "A chicken could not live on that field when we opened fire." The man wasn't being dramatic. He'd done the maths. December 13th, Burnside attacked anyway, because Lincoln was watching, because the pressure was unbearable, because sometimes generals make terrible decisions for political reasons. So 120,000 men marched across open fields, toward fortified heights, into pre-sighted artillery, row after row, wave after wave. Nearly 13,000 Union casualties by nightfall. Lee watched the whole thing from above and said quietly, "It is well that war is so terrible, lest we should grow too fond of it." Burnside was gone, obviously. Lincoln's next pick? Joseph Hooker. Confident, capable, and absolutely certain he had cracked the Lee problem. His plan was actually decent this time. Cross the Rappahannock with 70,000 men and catch Lee in a vice from multiple directions. My plans are perfect. May God have mercy on General Lee, for I will have none. He said that, out loud, to people. And honestly, it was working. 70,000 Union troops had crossed undetected. Lee was surrounded on multiple sides. Even his own officers were nervous. Then Hooker pulled his army back into the dense wilderness and dug in defensively. Thick trees, zero visibility. His artillery and cavalry, his biggest advantages, suddenly useless. Nobody knows exactly why, but Hooker later admitted it himself. I simply lost confidence in Joe Hooker. Lee saw the hesitation immediately. He saw the exposed flank, and he did the thing he always does. He split his army. Again. Already outnumbered more than 2-1, he split it again. Nearly 30,000 men under Stonewall Jackson vanished into the woods on a 12-mile march around the entire Union right flank, completely undetected. That afternoon, Union soldiers noticed something strange. Deer, foxes, and rabbits suddenly bursting out of the tree line. Panicked, running straight toward camp. Then came the gunfire. Jackson's line crashed into the Union flank. Regiments collapsed in minutes. Hooker found out about the attack when a stampede of terrified men and horses ran straight past his own headquarters. But then, tragedy. That night, Jackson rode out to scout Union positions in the dark. His own men, mistaking him for enemy cavalry, opened fire. His arm was amputated. He died 8 days later. Lee got the news and said nothing for a long moment. He has lost his left arm, but I have lost my right. Jackson was gone. Lee was grieving, and somehow he had still just beaten 130,000 men with 60,000. Which makes you wonder, how does that keep happening? Different battles, different generals, completely different situations, and somehow the same results every time. That wasn't luck, and it definitely wasn't random. There was a pattern. Every time Lee faced a stronger opponent, which was basically always, he did the same thing. He got inside their heads before the fighting even started. He studied them. He found the weakness, not in their army, in them. Pope was arrogant. Lee fed his ego until he made a fatal mistake. Burnside was impatient. Lee gave him time and let the waiting destroy him. Hooker was hesitant. Lee spotted the hesitation and punished it immediately. Different generals, same result. Lee didn't just fight armies. He fought the person commanding them. And that's what made him so dangerous. You could have twice his numbers, better supplies, better equipment, and it almost didn't matter, because Lee would find the one thing you were afraid of, and he would walk straight toward it. By 1863, facing Lee wasn't just a military problem. It was a psychological one, which is exactly why Lincoln stopped looking for a better tactician and started looking for someone who simply didn't care. Lincoln had a problem. Not a military problem. A people problem. Every general he picked was brilliant on paper. Every single one had a plan. And every single one walked away from Lee slightly more broken than before. So Lincoln stopped looking for brilliant. In March 1864, he handed command to Ulysses S. Grant, the man who had never stopped fighting in the West, who had captured entire Confederate armies at Fort Donelson, Vicksburg, and Chattanooga. Lincoln's instructions were almost brutally simple. Hold on with a bulldog grip and chew and choke as much as possible. Not outmaneuver, not outsmart, just bite down and don't let go. The Union soldiers weren't impressed. 3 years of watching Lee dismantle every general sent against him had done something to their confidence. Their reaction? Grant has never met Bobby Lee yet. They were about to find out that was exactly the point. Lee was a genius at beating generals who thought like generals. Grant didn't think like a general. Grant thought like an accountant. Cold, methodical, completely indifferent to the cost. Lincoln didn't want a genius anymore. He wanted a bulldog. May 1864. The Wilderness, Virginia. Lee and Grant meet for the first time. Brutal battle, dense forest, fires breaking out across the battlefield. By the time the smoke clears, Grant has lost over 17,000 men. Lee around 8,000. On paper, Lee won. His officers came to him that night. Grant's army was disorganized. The roads north were being prepared. Everyone expected the same thing that always happened next. Grant turned south. The Union soldiers, who fully expected to retreat, started cheering, running alongside Grant's horse. One soldier wept, because for the first time in 3 years, someone had looked Lee in the eye and just kept walking. And it kept happening. Spotsylvania, Cold Harbor, North Anna. Every single time, Lee won the battle. Grant turned south, again and again. Lee was fighting brilliantly, winning engagements, inflicting massive casualties. It didn't matter. Grant wasn't trying to win battles. He was trying to destroy Lee's army completely, and he was willing to accept any cost to do it. For the first time in the war, he was facing someone who simply didn't care about losing. And he had no move for that. Lee didn't stop, even when he probably should have. Even as Grant turned south after every battle. Even as the losses mounted. Even as replacements stopped arriving. But the arithmetic was brutal. The North had 20 million people. The South had 9 million. Every soldier Lee lost was irreplaceable. Every soldier Grant lost was replaced by mourning. By spring 1865, Lee had 50,000 men left. Grant had over 100,000 and more coming. Petersburg fell. Lee headed west with whatever remained, starving, exhausted, held together by sheer loyalty. Grant gave him no room. Every escape route cut off, every supply depot seized, every last hope strangled. April 6th, Sailor's Creek. 7,700 Confederates captured in a single afternoon. Lee watched from a distance. My God, has the army dissolved? Almost. April 9th, 1865. Lee sent a flag of truce. Grant arrived in muddy field clothes. Lee in a spotless dress uniform, sword at his side. Grant was gracious. Officers kept their sidearms. Soldiers kept their horses. He even fed Lee's starving army, 25,000 rations, on the spot. Lee said, "This will have a very happy effect on my army." And then, it was over. Lee spent his final years as president of Washington College, a symbol of the lost cause, the idea that the South hadn't lost because they were wrong, just because they ran out of men. But the truth is simpler. Lee was one of the greatest battlefield tacticians who ever lived. But Grant understood something Lee never fully accepted, and it cost the Confederacy everything. Lee taught armies how to fight. Grant showed how to win. If you enjoyed this, drop a comment, hit subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.